The new Final Destination film, Final Destination Bloodlines, is much better than the last 2 or 3 previous films in the franchise. Nowhere near as good as the first 2. It takes a different approach on the very well-known formula of Final Destination, where someone has a premonition, everyone dies in interesting and goofy ways, often quite horrible ways. In more recent films, they die via CGI, which is honestly the worst way to go out. But then the character who has the premonition saves everyone, and then everyone is picked off one by one in even more creative ways. Basically, directors and producers of these films just want excuses to make interesting deaths, and I do not blame them one bit. I don't know why I'm explaining the story of Final Destination to you, because everyone on the planet knows it. And this film, Final Destination Bloodlines, knows that everyone knows it as well. Because it's paced quite well, this film, but as soon as you get to the character development parts to explain how each characters interact with each other in this family, why some of them don't like certain characters because they abandoned them when they were children and shit like that, and how, you abandoned us as well, and all this drama, it's just rushed through really quickly. That's good, because number one, they aren't necessarily the best actors. You don't need to be the best actor to be in a Final Destination film. You just have to have a really good scream. And number two, like I said earlier, everybody knows how Final Destination works. So they have to put in the bits where a character works out how it works and all that, just for the new audiences who are watching. But in reality, everyone who's gone to see it already knows how it works and what the storyline is going to be. Why is there a towel hanging out the back of this van? Is that how Germans claim vans? You just put a towel on it, like it's a sun lounger by the swimming pool. What's good about this film? Well, surprisingly a lot, considering the mess that the last few films were in. They were just CGI messes, pretty abhorrent, with really uninteresting characters. This one has fairly okay characters for a horror film. It has one character who is the comedy relief, and he isn't actually the cringe comedy relief. He is the actual decent and quite funny comedy relief, especially, spoilers by the way, when he finds out that he's technically safe from the curse because his dad isn't his biological dad because the mother cheated on them, and that is quite funny, that scene. The beginning scene as well is very good. Obviously we know how Final Destinations are formatted, with the intro bit being the scene which is all dramatic and explosive when everyone dies. That went on for a long time and it was actually good. You know, this is probably the 7th or 8th film in this series now. You do wonder when they're going to run out of interesting spectacles that humans can relate to at the beginning of these films where everyone can die in entertaining ways. And they've done a good job of it. I mean, they did have to completely make up a building. It's basically just this long tube with a disc at the top which has a restaurant inside. But it works. I feel like we've all been in tall buildings with restaurants at the top. I know I have. Luckily I was not Final Destinationed, but I could have been if you look at this photo. And the reason this one's called Bloodlines is, well, when I first saw the trailer, I thought some of the characters from the first few films survived and had children, or had children before they died. But no, it just creates a whole new set of characters, which I don't think is bad. I think that worked out kind of better. And speaking of characters, the best character in the whole series returns. I don't think it's the same actor, but the character does. It's the black guy in the morgue from the first episode. This is how many films they've done. I've started calling them episodes. And even though there was CGI, and everyone knows I hate CGI, in fairness, you can't cut someone in... Spoilers. You can't cut someone in half with an elevator that is just snapped from the ceiling in real life, can you? So you kind of have to CGI stuff like that. And there were definitely obvious signs of CGI in other deaths where you see their face and it's close up and it's very obvious that it's CGI. But it wasn't necessarily bad CGI. And I can forgive almost all the CGI purely because at the end, in the final bit where there's only 3 characters left, there's this giant explosion. This house explodes. We'll get back to the house in a minute because that's diabolical. The house explodes, and to me it looked like a very real explosion, so I will give them that. But speaking of that house, the person in the premonition right at the start of the film owns that house and has been living there for decades and somehow surviving. But the good thing about Final Destination films is that they've always been set in reality. You could always relate to it because you've always, everyone's been on a plane, everyone's been on, driving down the motorway, everyone's been on a roller coaster. I know there's going to be some dickhead in the comments saying, I haven't been on any of those. And you know what? Whatever. I'm talking averages here. averages of the people that are going to watch this film. I'm not talking the residents of North Sentinel Island, am I? But yeah, the main character goes to meet this woman who's her grandmother and has been surviving for decades in this house in the middle of the woods. I was like, you know what, that's fair enough. Maybe you would want to live in the woods in the middle, excluded from everyone else for safety. But that house looks so goofy. It looks like a medieval fortress with all these spikes outside of it. At the end of the day, that is somewhat believable that she could do that. I mean, fuck knows where she's getting all the money from to be able to, afford everything else that you need to survive, like medication, considering she has cancer. Spoilers. But she has this fancy electronic gate and this fancy intercom section, which steals. What is that? I legit thought it was a police car because it's so fucking Is that a fucking XM? Damn, that's the second XM I've seen. Weirdly, it's a nice colour. It looks like a stormtrooper helmet from the back. Oh, the car behind me is defo a police car though. I can see the fucking lights in the front. I wonder if they have an issue with me filming. Hope not. And then they rip an idea right out of Better Call Saul, where the character has to put all of her belongings and electronics in the mailbox outside before entering the house. I'd sue them, to be honest. But because all the films have been relatable, with relatable deaths, even this one at the beginning with the restaurant, to then have this over-the-top house which someone's been hunkering down in, it just kind of takes you out of the realism. And I've just realised I'm complaining about realism in a film about death coming for people and killing them. Maybe I'm the problem. The film is an hour and 50 minutes long. I dare say 11 to 15 minutes of those are credits, so it does not overstay its welcome. Like I said before, it does not elongate unnecessarily the dialogue scenes about the characters, because we don't care about the characters, we just need to know the basics about them. Let's be honest, I don't even remember any of their names. It spends time on what it should spend time on in a Final Destination film, which is the deaths and people, trying to survive, but they never survive. There was something I think they could have been clever with and missed out on. I mentioned it before, but when we find out this character wasn't supposed to die because he's not biologically a guy who wasn't supposed to exist to begin with. He's in this room with an MRI machine, and he starts getting all his piercings ripped out, and then he gets trapped against the machine. And I was like, he's not supposed to die, so they could do something really interesting here, where he's in a state where he should die, just by pure accident or his pure stupidity. And then they could do an interesting thing where the other characters are like, we can't even kill him to get him out of his misery. And then they're like, damn, maybe death isn't the worst thing that could happen to us, or something like that. That would have been an interesting play. But they didn't. He just gets sucked into a magnetic donut. But it does truly have a nice new take on the Final Destination idea. I know they tried to do it differently in other films. I think one of them, someone had premonitions where they saw these CGI objects spinning in their head or something, and those were the objects that were going to be used to kill people. Oh, and I think in the third one she took pictures, and everyone she took pictures of dies or something, and it explains how they're going to die or some rubbish like that. This one takes a less obnoxious approach, where it just has a simple family tree, and so we know which order they're all going to die in. There's twists and turns because someone's not actually related to them, and then this happens, and then that happens, and then I see all the fucking traffic in front of me and cry. Other good things about this film which are noteworthy. Cinematography, I liked it, it was good. They did a good job of portraying fear, with close-ups of all these objects, and obviously it's Final Destination, so there's a lot of Chekhov's guns in it, let's just put it that way. Cinematography wasn't boring in the way it portrayed them or anything, and it was interesting. It kept doing this weird thing where it was the camera would twist and zoom in whilst also moving backwards, so it would have that weird effect where it changes the depth of the image. But moving on to a few more negative things that I didn't quite like about this film. Bearing in mind I don't like horror films, so you should take everything I say with a huge mountain of salt. So number one, I was watching this thinking, I'm gonna listen out for the 180 or the 180 reference. Because in the first film, it's Flight 180. In the second film, I think it's Highway 180 or something. I don't know what it is in the other films, but I know the reference was always 180. Same way whenever, why can't I say whenever? Whenever death is near, there's wind, which they do in this film as well. But I didn't hear or see any reference to 180 or 180, which surprised me. Maybe at the beginning with the Tall Tower restaurant, maybe they said it was 180 feet tall or something. Is that even tall? I don't fucking know. I'm gonna have to rewatch it or something. And that's the thing with Final Destination films. they are more entertaining to watch the second time around, because it does build tension very well, this film, and because everyone knows the formula, everyone can just kind of just sense when a death is going to happen, you know. So you're kind of just like there waiting for a jump scare or someone to be horrifically murdered in front of your eyes, or horrifically CGI'd in front of your eyes. I don't know which one's worse. Speaking of being horrifically CGI'd, the deaths are unique. I'll give them that. Except for the last two, which are kind of played for goofs, because they always do that at the end of the Final Destination films, where characters think they survived, and then at the end they haven't survived and they die just before the credits roll, and it goes into their fancy stylized credits before the actual rolling credits. And the last one, spoilers, the last two deaths involves a train, but the train doesn't hit them, two logs do, which is obviously in reference to the very well-known opening scene to the second Final Destination film, where the logs fall off the lorry. But all the other deaths, they were unique. One of them involved an MRI machine, which, don't get me wrong, interesting deaths. Spoilers again. Interesting deaths. The only issue with me is that they stayed in the room with the MRI machine on. What adult, or what two adults in America do not know what an MRI machine is? I probably knew what an MRI machine was at 16 years old. Especially when you're in a hospital and you enter a random room and then you hear a whirring sound and see a donut with a fucking flat thing for people to lie on in the middle. What else could it possibly be? A sauna? Although saunas don't end well either in this series, do they? Oh, actually, another bad thing, which it's not a bad thing, it's, you know, you can tell that they wanted to portray this character in this way, but I just did my head in, is in the intro scene, the premonition is from the perspective of this woman. It's in the 50s as well. So I don't know if she was able to vote then or not. But that's besides the point. Her partner, who was able to vote, shouldn't have been able to vote, because, oh my god, was he fucking useless. He was the simpiest bitch on the planet, and he was purely useless. He proposed to her, and I'm shocked that she said yes. Oh, actually, no, I'm not. She was pregnant. I think the 50s was still when you couldn't have children before being married or some rubbish like that.